You pass someone on the street. You have never met them. You never will again. And yet, in the half second before you look away, your body already made a decision about them. Your shoulders tightened, just slightly. Your eyes flicked to their hands. You call this nothing. You barely notice it happens, but your ancestors would recognize it instantly because for most of human history, that half-second decision was the difference between living and not living to see tomorrow. Every stranger you pass today is processed by a system built for a world that had almost no strangers in it at all. For roughly 95% of the time modern humans have existed, people lived in small bands. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, studying primate brain size and social group structures, found that human social circles naturally cap out around 150 stable relationships. Not thousands, not even hundreds in any meaningful sense. About 150 people you could know, track, and trust across a lifetime. Everyone outside that number was, by definition, a stranger. And the stranger in that world was rarely neutral. Think about what it actually meant to encounter someone unfamiliar 40,000 years ago. This person did not share your food stores. They did not share your history, your alliances, your rules. They might belong to a group that saw your territory as theirs to take. There was no ID to check, no uniform, no badge, no way to verify intention from a distance. All your ancestors had was instinct, built from a simple, brutal calculation. Unknown person, unknown risk. This is why your brain still runs a background check on every unfamiliar face you see, whether you want it to or not. Psychologist Alexander Todorov at Princeton has spent years studying how quickly people form judgments about strangers. His research found that people form impressions of trustworthiness from a face in under 1/10 of a second, not a full second, a tenth of one. Faster than you can consciously decide to have an opinion, your brain has already delivered one. This did not happen because your brain is careless. It happened because for nearly all of human history, hesitation in front of an unfamiliar person could cost you everything. Here is where the story takes a strange turn. You might assume that ancient humans treated all strangers with pure suspicion, weapons drawn, trust withheld, but the archaeological and anthropological record tells a more complicated story. Strangers were dangerous, yes, but they were also sometimes essential. Anthropologist Kim Hill, who has spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies, including the Ashe of Paraguay and Hadza of Tanzania, documented something counterintuitive. Small foraging bands frequently formed alliances with distant, unrelated groups, not out of warmth, out of necessity. A drought could wipe out your territory's food. A conflict could scatter your group. Genetic diversity required occasional exchange between bands that had never met. Survival sometimes depended on turning a stranger into something else entirely, an ally, a trading partner, eventually kin. The instinct to fear the unknown person existed alongside an equally old instinct to test whether that person could become known. This is the real inheritance you carry, not a switch that reads danger and stops there. A slower, second system that keeps evaluating after the first snap judgment fires. Neuroscientists have identified this as a kind of dual process. The amygdala fires first, fast and crude, tagging unfamiliar faces with a flicker of threat response before you consciously register anything. But almost immediately after, the prefrontal cortex begins layering in more nuanced information. Body language, tone of voice, context. Is this person smiling? Are they alone? Do they seem lost or predatory? Your ancient alarm system hands the decision off to a second, slower system built specifically to update the first one. This is why a stranger who seems threatening at first glance can, within seconds, seem completely harmless once they speak, or laugh, or ask for directions. Your brain was never built to lock in that first judgment. It was built to revise it, quickly, using more information than a face alone. So why does this still matter now, in a world where you might see hundreds of unfamiliar faces before lunch? Because your brain has no idea the world changed this much. You now live surrounded by more strangers in a single subway ride than your ancestors would have encountered in several lifetimes. Your amygdala does not know the difference between a genuinely dangerous stranger on an empty ancient plane and a barista, a delivery driver, a new co-worker standing at the elevator. It still fires the same tiny flicker of caution every single time because it has no updated instructions. Psychologist Susan Fiske, who has researched social cognition and stereotyping at Princeton, has described how the brain relies on rapid, low-effort categorization to manage the sheer volume of social information modern life demands. You are not paranoid. You are running ancient software on a workload it was never designed to handle. This explains something that might otherwise feel embarrassing. That instinctive wariness you feel meeting someone new, even in a perfectly safe setting like a work meeting or a party, is not a character flaw. It is your amygdala firing the same signal it fired for a stranger on the tree line 40,000 years ago, at a volume built for actual physical danger, in a context that presents none. It also explains the opposite feeling, the relief, almost disproportionate, when a stranger turns out to be kind. When someone helps you find your platform or splits their umbrella with you in the rain, something in you responds more strongly than the moment probably warrants. That is not irrational either. That is the second system, the one your ancestors relied on to convert strangers into allies, recognizing a signal it was built to reward. Modern life has scrambled the math your instincts were built around. In an ancient band, meeting a new person was rare enough that each encounter mattered enormously, and your evaluation system had time and reason to run its full course, threat assessment, followed by careful reassessment. Now the encounters come too fast for that second, slower system to always catch up. You form snap judgments about hundreds of people a week and rarely get the extended contact that would let your brain properly revise them. The fast system fires constantly. The slow system, built to soften and correct it, often never gets the chance. This might be part of why so many people report feeling more suspicious of others than they consciously believe they should be. It is not a personal failing. It is a mismatch between an ancient alarm and a modern world running at a scale that alarm was never built to process. There is something worth sitting with here. The same wiring that makes you tense slightly around an unfamiliar face on a dark street is the wiring that once helped small groups of humans survive a genuinely dangerous world, and the same wiring that lets a stranger's smile disarm your suspicion in seconds is the wiring that let those same small groups grow, trade, mix, and eventually become the enormous, interconnected species you belong to today. You are not just descended from people who feared strangers. You are descended from people who learned again and again when it was safe to stop. The next time you catch yourself sizing someone up in that first half second, before you have consciously decided anything at all, remember what that moment actually is. It is not paranoia. It is not judgment. Not really. It is one of the oldest processes your species has, still running, still trying to protect you, waiting for the rest of the evidence to come in. You pass someone on the street, you have never met them, you never will again. But for one brief moment, your body runs the same ancient calculation it always has, and somewhere underneath the instinct, it is still asking the same question your ancestors once asked around every unfamiliar fire. Not whether to fear this person, whether, given time, they could become someone you trust.